So the barman said, "You can stay, but the goblin in the Santa outfit, he has to go." Oh, did you hear that?
Yeah.
It sounds like it's coming from the
I can see
fireplace.
some feet coming down.
Ho, ho, ho.
Is that you, Santa?
Ho, ho, ho.
Oh gosh, that's a tight fit.
Ho,
Yeah.
ho. Oh, no.
Do you want a hand there? Here you are, hold that. Oh, cheers, Santa.
Cheers.
Don't thank me. Thank Hornby.
Oh,
Nice one.
Oh, brilliant.
Is it ticking?
Sounds like it's made the journey in one piece.
Yes. Not broken.
Cheers, Santa.
Yeah.
Ho, ho, ho.
The mince pies are on the top of the chimney.
Oh, I'll drink to that.
Cheers.
Right. Well, they've got this all well.
Nicely done.
Yeah, I like this.
I'm going to save it for next year.
Oh.
Right.
So let's see. What have they sent us? Oh, and we got a letter here as well.
From Santa.
Well, from Hornby. But next best thing, eh?
Yes.
And it says, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to take all these items that they very kindly sent over and turn them into a winter-stroke Christmas-themed diorama in, around an afternoon, maybe a few hours' work, just to show what kind of things that we can achieve with a few simple scenic items.
Yeah.
So, are you game for
I'm
that?
game. I'm on. Yeah.
So, bearing in mind, we've got to build a small diorama out of this.
Right.
Let's get the bits out, see what they sent us.
Keep hold of these as well. You never
Actually,
know.
that's a good point, yeah.
Might
You can always
come in for the
use...
rocks or whatever we decide to make.
Yeah, I mean, all of this we can make use of. They sent over a box with packing materials, so let's make use of that in the scenery. So, first up, I can see some figures.
Oh, right.
So, we've got some town people,
Yeah.
some people sitting, and some more town people.
More town people.
That seems to be all the people. So, what I'm thinking is, I'm looking at them, and we can use them as the basis for people in a kind of winter scene.
Yeah. Maybe around some Christmas trees. Somebody selling Christmas trees or whatever.
Yeah, and can we do some of them, make them look like ice skaters? If we kind of paint a representation of ice
We
skates?
might be able to do something, snowball fight or something.
Yes.
Make a little snowman out of something with them.
Yeah, because I can see they're actually, some of these, they're wearing some pretty nice coats. And
Yeah.
so we can really do something
We can work
with
on those.
And then,
The letterbox.
letterboxes.
Oh, yes.
I think at least one of these we should have a thing like saying post to the North Pole or something.
Yeah.
So letters to Santa. So yeah, we can do that.
Covered in snow as well. The areas of it.
And then, brilliant!
Oh,
These
wow.
are great. The scale scenics trees. I really love these. They're really great for setting the scene. And
those are nice.
they've sent over evergreens as well, which is brilliant for winter. So we can make full use of those. And I think a little sprinkling of snow on them.
As if it's just the first flurry of snow, or rather than a full made up.
It just mutes the green down,
Yeah.
and I think that they're going to really frame this scene.
Right.
So there's two there. There's another one here.
So, just a smaller version of that.
Slightly smaller version of that. But yeah, these are great trees. I've used them before, so I'm pleased they've sent that. And then we've got some of the...
the lichen.
Yeah, the stone grey lichen. And that's the perfect starting colour.
because it's like a frosty finish to it rather than a bright, vivid green.
So I don't think we're going to need to do an awful lot to this, but it'll make great undergrowth for part of the scene. So yeah, that's looking good. And then we've got an assortment of different scatters. So we've got grey scatter, flockage medium brown, and flockage dark brown as well. So that'll give us some of our ground cover.
Yeah.
And then building-wise,
What have we got?
I can see they've sent over a brick bridge here.
Right, so possibilities, either water coming under the bridge or a road, maybe a single track going across the top.
Well, I think this sets the levels for us, because what I see with this is have the track on a higher level,
as the back seat,
almost like on an embankment. We can make use of the trees in an embankment up, and then maybe have the embankment keep going a little bit.
Either it's more of a road bridge than a river bridge, but it could have been river if you want, but a road coming through, maybe to some houses, and a little village green and a pond that's frozen over, maybe.
Actually, yeah, if we have a pond that's frozen, we can have the people ice skating on it. I think that might be a good touch.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but you talk about buildings, but they've also sent over a toy shop.
Oh, right.
And I'm thinking...
Santa's Grotto.
And there's also the railway stores, which is like a little hut. And I do like the look of that. Because we can have that almost like a Santa's grotto next door to the toy shop.
Yeah.
And then have that as a focal point at one side of the display.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good idea.
Or we can have a whole load of like little Christmas trees. Somebody selling them, maybe little cars with a Christmas tree on the top being, taken away. Yeah, definitely. A sort of winter stroke Christmas scene.
Yeah. Just a little village kind of setting where people have come to collect some last minute Christmas things, Christmas trees, sweets and toys from the shops and everything. Yeah.
That's brilliant.
So maybe something that's round about 2 foot by 18 inches as a sort of diorama base.
Right.
Quite simple, but quite effective.
Well, I think the great thing about building a small diorama is that there's always, on a model railway, there's lots of space.
Corners.
That is just crying out for these little cameos, and you can do so much with just a few items like this. So we're
less is more in many ways.
Very much so. So I think we're going to go away and we're going to see what we can do.
Yes.
A nice little small diorama, and with that track on it as well, we can pose trains on it and really get that.
It doesn't have to be a motion sort of railway or anything. It's just static. But the idea would be that if somebody was to make this, then they could fit it into their track, which would be working.
Essentially, it's about the scenic ideas and how you can incorporate that. So, are you game?
I'm game. Yeah,
grand.
Yeah.
So
don't forget the rest of the scenic stuff.
Oh yeah, because that's the other thing as well. I think a lot of people might easily forget that a lot of this paperwork, you can use that as a filler in the actual ground to make the best use of everything that's here.
And we can use the cardboard from this to help to make the landscape, the embankment, cut strips and masking tape and stuff to hold it in place. Yeah, we've got plenty there to get on with.
And essentially, all we're limited by is our imagination.
Yes.
And time. We've got an afternoon to do this.
3 or 4 hours, something like that.
I'd say 4 hours.
4 hours, right. Okay.
Let's get to it.
Let's knock on.
Right, so we've got the basic board here. You've done a lovely job. Then I've added in a mechanism for the pond. I was really keen to get this revolving, and I've managed to make something up, so...
Yeah, it's pretty nifty, that.
Yeah, we can get that moving. I think with the ice skaters on there, as long as we can actually get the banks coming down
to hide
the edge, but not obstruct it.
And not have it, like you were saying, too circular a looking pond, a more raggedy kind of finish to it.
Effectively, I think what we need is like a mask over the top with the cutout, and that becomes the base for the scenery.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking, we've got this bridge that they sent over. If we have the track at the back at a kind of little angle,
maybe a bit further forward.
Yeah, and then what we can do is this end of the bridge, we've got the toy shop. We can use that, even maybe raise it up if need be, and use that to hide where the track goes behind it. And then at this side, we can have just like the embankment and then a bank coming down. And we can use trees to just kind of obscure where the track's going.
Disappears,
And I think
I can do some sort of drawing onto the background to emulate as if the railway lights disappearing.
And just have like a leaden sky type thing as well.
Sort of a grey style.
But I think we've got a really good, almost a blank canvas here. And I like the idea as well, is if we have that little hut, the office building that we're going to have is like the Christmas tree store.
Right.
So we've got the little Christmas trees.
Got some N-gauge Christmas trees, haven't we?
Yeah, some really small ones. So I think the first thing that we need to do is get the landscape. Well, actually, even before we do that, we need to set where the train track's going. So we need to get a base, get some track on, get that actually fixed in, and then go from there. And then we can start building up the scenery. We've got materials to do it. We just need to crack on, I guess.
Right. Okay, let's do it. Okay, so I'm going to try and weather this bridge up. So just got some watercolour paint.
So it's basically the mortar you're getting.
It's just the mortar, and I'm using my fingers, but you could be a bit cleaner if you wanted and use a brush or a cotton bud or something like that. Rub
it just brings out all that detail, doesn't it?
Rub it into that, and then can wipe.
Yeah, and then you end up with it just into the.
So you get a lot of it into the cracks. It doesn't matter too much if there's places where it misses, because mortar isn't all the same colour. You'll get sort of black areas and greeny areas and white areas.
Yeah.
We'll let that dry.
I've got some watercolour pencils in like greens and browns.
I could do with those.
Yeah,
yes.
we can use those.
Let that dry off. Now I'll do both sides and I'll do some of the underneath as well. Not all of it will be visible. This is why I always come home with such dirty hands.
Well, that's kind of this. I use like white acrylic, and you water it down a bit. Do you find it better not to water it then?
I've done both, but at the end of the day, the white needs to be as much into the crevices as possible. Let that dry off, and then it's a dry brush on the top to get the brick colours. On a lot of mine on Not Lowbury, I've used the cheap emulsion match pots that you get from the DIY shops, because the pigment in those is very good, much better than some of the very cheap poster paints that you can buy. And there's a very good range of subtle colours as well.
I just love the way, because it kind of gets into all those little
nooks and crannies. So a cottonwood ball or a cocktail stick is an ideal little tool as well to use. But
and then if you do on that back wall as well,
wall on there,
and that'll look really good, because we don't have to worry about the back so much.
Well, the thing as well is it's going to be a snowy scene. So, we'll probably have to put some more white onto it.
Well, we've got the white snow scatter. So what we'll do with that is, what I tend to do is spray with hairspray or something, and then the scatter kind of just blow it into the hairspray whilst it's still slightly tacky. What I'm thinking of doing here is where we've got the lake, which is going to turn around with the skaters on, so it looks like they're skating in circles. I've got to build up the terrain very carefully around this to give clearance, so that this can still spin, but it looks like it's the skaters that are moving rather than the water. And how I'm going to do that is I think I'm going to build up with scrap pieces of cardboard or wood just glued around it, so that I then get a top layer that I can build almost a mask that will have the cutout of the shape of the lake. And I'll make it a little bit irregular. And then that will provide a very firm base for the scenery to be built on top of without actually sticking to this or obstructing this, and that's the important thing. So I think that's probably an early thing to do in this build, as well as the bridge that Les is working on. And once we've got those in place, we can really rock on and get the landscape in place and build up that plaster layer.
Just mixing different colours of watercolour in here and basically smudging them all together to create sort of the dirty kind of effect that you'd often find underneath one of these bridges. I mean, it would never look as pristine and as red as the actual Hornby model would suggest. So over its lifetime it would have had sort of smoke, bird guano would have settled onto the brickwork. So it's really just trying to give it a much more realistic weathered look, just with some very basic paints. And the great thing about using things like watercolour or pastel is it's water based or it's a chalk base, and it will easily wipe off. Obviously you can fix it to some extent with a varnish afterwards and makes it more durable, but generally speaking, for the purpose of this, it doesn't matter because it won't be handled a great deal, but it means you can just keep building up, taking off, building up until you're happy with sort of the overall effect that you want. And this really just has to look like a dirty snow-covered bridge with some of the brickwork showing through, but with a lot of basically snow and ice that's congealed and collected on the bridge. I'm just trying to get off some of the excess and using the texture of the scraper to fetch some of it off and to make it a bit more smoother in places. You can use all kinds of things to get the kind of finish you're looking for, and then you can always add back onto it. Now what I'm also going to do is I'm actually going to use the white watercolour paint as if it's the snow. So on certain bits where the snow may have got blown in, rather than worrying about wiping it off, I'm actually building up a slightly thicker layer of the paint, and it will dry, plus we're going to be sticking on some of the white snow scatter. So this will all help to create that kind of wintry feel on there. A hot glue gun would have been one way of making the icicles. All I've done is to make a strip of the hot glue gun, and then with a sharp blade I've just scratched into it while it's still wet to make a whole series of icicles. I've done it on a scrap piece of glass, and then with a sharp blade I can peel these off. Some of them will come off in full length, so you can break them accordingly, and then you can adhere them to the building or whatever else you want to with just a little bit more hot glue gun if necessary.
I do have some speed bond PVA, and it might be...
That might work just the same.
Because it does dry quite quickly, and
Yeah.
what I'm thinking is I just have a scrap piece of something like balsa wood and just dip the glue to it and draw it down, let it set, and then kind of lengthen it and lengthen it.
Yeah, well worth trying.
Right, I found a few bits and pieces, some scrap from up in the loft.
Right.
So just some offcuts of wood, which I'm sure we can put to good use. Just basically stuff that would have gone in the bin otherwise. There's some of this, I think you left it here.
Oh, dry mount board, yes, that'll come in useful.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I've got a scrap offcut of very thin plywood, and that is big enough that I can cut out, and that can be the mask that we then cut out the shape of the pond. And then that gives us a really good base for the scenery. And with it painted white, it's a bit snowy. And then I've also got an offcut of this from when I did all of the insulation up in the loft. And what I'm thinking is we can peel the foil off, and we can actually build up structure of things like the viaduct. We can cut out of lengths of this, and also the scenery behind that. We've got something solid yet light underneath.
Yeah.
And I think that will work quite well.
Yeah,
I mean,
and it's soft enough to push things into, like, the trees and whatever.
Definitely, trees you just spike straight in. So I think that this is going to be absolutely fine. I'm sure I've got another piece somewhere as well. So with all of this stuff, which would otherwise just go in the bin, is perfect for improvising scenery on a model railway.
What I've done so far is to take this polystyrene block stuff, cut it into a couple of wedges to go either side of the bridge, which is where the track's going to be. We've partly weathered up the front of the bridge there. We're not going to worry about the back because it won't be seen. And that's basically where the track's going to be laid. This will then get plaster of Paris bandages put over the top of it. The track will get ballasted in place. All of this will be mod rocked up. We might still make it slope down a little bit more rather than having a high vertical edge there.
Well, what I'm thinking here is that the toy shop,
that's right,
is going to go here, but we're going to put it on like a riser, so it's a little bit higher, and that's going to obscure where the track goes.
Yeah.
And we have it at a nice jaunty angle. I think an angle like that, then we can actually get, because it's just bare on that side, but the other three sides, including this side, has actually got some really nice detail. So I think that we can make a feature of that at a lovely angle.
I mean, obviously, if this was being done on somebody's layout, they would make all of this link in to something else.
Yeah.
This is just a little corner section, or sometimes you get a corner on a railway and you don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with having a trompe-l'oeil effect of another line that's going somewhere.
Definitely.
As a feature.
And then what I'm doing around here is I've started work on building the ground level up so that this pond here, and I'm testing it at all times to make sure it doesn't catch. And the idea behind this is we're just using the cardboard off the box that all the goodies from Hornby came in, cutting that into strips, building it up with some white glue, and then once we get to the top layer here, I've got some scrap thin 6mm plywood, and I'm going to cut a piece and then work out a shape, and that is going to be the fixed shape of the pond, and that will now sit quite neatly on top of the card layer that I've built up. And this now means if I just hold that in place, when I turn this, you see that the water now moves around underneath, but you no longer see the edges. So once we've got skaters attached to that, we've got our skaters on the pond. So then, once that's in place, the scenery builds onto that, and when this turns around, you won't see the edge of this disc. You'll just see this stationary outline of the pond, and that gives us this wonderful effect where you can have the ice skaters appearing to all skate in circles. And I think that that is going to work really, really well. And it's a simple animation that anybody could put together on their own home layout. And sometimes the simple things really give you something special. In this corner, what I envisage is I like the idea of using some more of this scrap foam board that we've got lying about and building up the landscape, coming right up here, and maybe in this corner have some kind of a steep, almost a cliff representation, yes. Because that then gives us this different textures, different scenery, and I think a lot of that is what you can actually have so much detail in even just a small area, quite easily and cheaply, just by thinking about your textures and your colours. And one way to do that is with a cliff face. And we can do that quite easily in the same techniques that we used when we built the War of the Worlds layout. Yeah. And I think that that's going to come together and be really good.
I think what we could do here, we've got some material to make a road surface. We could bring like an asphalt road here. We've got another building, or is it just a little hut?
There's a little hut, which I'm thinking we have, say, here.
Yeah.
And have that as the Christmas tree sales room.
And we could make a little dirt track that's leading up round behind that.
So we could have that almost as a slope going up and then into the trees.
Into the trees, because again, like a forest.
Definitely.
Track.
And that's one of the things that you should also think about. If you can obscure where things go, so everything's not just plain on display. So you've got tracks that disappear into the trees, tracks that disappear behind buildings, the same with roads and paths. Then you've got these different angles, and it forces you to look at a model railway from different angles and get a different view each time. And that's how you can build up these really engaging model railways that kind of suck you into the scene.
We can't do quite the same kind of perspective that you do when you use different gauges of railway, N gauge and O gauge and OO gauge, or could use O gauge and OO as the scenic backdrop. So we're a bit limited on the depth and perspective that we can get. But certainly, like Jenny has said, by obscuring the way that this track disappears behind trees, and when the landscape's painted a little bit at the back, we might even put a tunnel entrance on yet, or a fake tunnel, just to give that illusion that it is another line that's going somewhere. And then it's perfectly sort of positioned to pose something on there for more photographic purposes.
What we're going to do is I'm just going to finish a few minor adjustments.
And then we need something to weight that down, don't we?
Yeah, what we'll do is we'll put some books or something on top. But before I do that, I want to stretch out something like maybe even just cling film. And the idea behind that is that I don't want the plaster or any of the paint to stick to this.
So that protects it basically.
It just protects this whilst we then build up the scenery. And then once all the scenery's in, painted and dried, we can kind of pull that out and clean it up. And then what we will have is a nice clean ice surface.
What I'm doing here is I'm just going to build this up a little bit higher on this side to help the top of the building here disguise where the track surface is going to be there. This will probably have brick paper put on it, something to give it a textured finish, and maybe also on that area there as it goes into the rock face. And then this sort of area that the shop is on will be sort of grass, maybe a little bit of pavement around it, but the lower level here will have the pavement that separates the traffic from here, and there'll be a little bit more of this polystyrene put on here to make up the base. So generally speaking, that's coming on quite nicely. We'll also put a little bit more polystyrene up on the back here to make it look like the hills going up into the distance. Do you remember we had quite a bit of packaging material in that box from Hornby? So this was just a corrugated or card paper. So I've put it through the water, wrung it out. I've now got quite a malleable sort of product that I can use to start to build a base layer for joining some of the rock work and everything. This will all get hidden under the plaster of Paris. It's not too wet and soggy that it'll go mouldy or anything, and by the time the plaster is stuck to it and dried out, that will be fine. But it's so easy to landscape using this sort of stuff. You don't have to worry too much about the exact layer of it, because once the plaster of Paris bandages go on and you start pushing it in and drying it out, it'll be fine. But you can build up to where Jenny's been building this.
And the best thing about it is it's free.
You can use it to pack in little bits where there's nothing and everything.
So these bits glued?
They are partly glued. They will dry out more as time goes on, but all these sort of gaps here can get filled in with this kind of stuff.
And that just stops the plaster cloth from sagging.
Yeah, it does.
Which is, you know, you obviously don't want that.
Literally just run the tap over it, soak it, scrunch it up, bring it out, get as much of the water out as you possibly can. It's basically how they turn paper back into pulp again. You're sort of going through that stage.
We've got some good stuff going on here. And I've also been working on the mast layer for the pond. So I've got that in. I've used some bolts just to kind of sandwich everything together whilst the glue dries. And I'm just checking that it still goes round underneath there. So there's our pond.
The ice has been made by using a piece of cheap acrylic off a clip frame that I cut round. I then stuck it onto some black textured mount card, and the grey that's on there is literally just the splodges of where the glue was that was holding the acrylic onto the card, and it dried into this kind of grey colour. And then I scratched the surface of it as well before I stuck the acrylic onto it to give that kind of idea that the ice skaters have left marks on it. Now when that's finished and we've got everything else around it, we'll probably put some Mod Podge, which is an artist's textured acrylic, onto the top of that and stipple that on to make it look a little bit more icy. But the idea is it's sort of black and grey, which when you look at sort of a frozen river tends to be sort of just dark greys and sort of dark greens in it. So it's quite effective, but it'll look a lot better when we've got proper landscape around it.
But this has come together really well. Looking at the time, just under an hour's work. And what we're getting ready for now is to do the plaster cloth, plaster bandage. So I've got some here, these come as sheets. What I'm going to do is cut these down a bit so that we've got littler pieces to just make it a bit easier to work with in the space that we've got here. And then we're going to build up the landscape and just see where we get to. It's really going to come together quite quickly at this stage and very, very quickly start to look like something's coming together, and it's going to gain a lot of strength and integrity with this plaster. And in front of the log fire that we've got going here, it should dry quite quickly. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we can actually get on to doing the actual ground surface tonight as well. So at this stage, you don't have to be too precise. It's just simply a case of getting that covering onto the model. Soak it, let it drip, and then we just start building it up, and then you kind of smooth it. And the trick I find is you've got to smooth it until you don't get those little holes. Isn't that right, Les?
Yeah,
you just kind of
and push it into this, the paper, and everything, so it all becomes like one congealed.
Yeah.
I've cut my pieces slightly smaller than Jen, but it's personal taste how you.
Yeah, I mean you can vary. I find when you're covering quite a big area like we've got here, I'm okay using the slightly bigger pieces, and then if I'm doing detail work, I like to go down to a smaller size.
It does go on quite quickly, and it's drying quite fast as well, but again that's because we've got the heat.
Yeah, it's nice and warm in here, which does help. If you're in a cold environment, it'll take a lot longer.
Not Lobie was in a cold environment, and it would take days for it to completely dry.
So what we're doing here is we're just putting a layer of plaster bandage over everything. We're even going to do the road surface. And the reason for this is we've decided that the easiest and most effective way to actually do the road is we're going to build it up with emulsion paint. We've got brown water-based emulsion paint, and then put a lot of sand into that, mixed up. So it's almost like masonry paint, and that'll provide the road base. And then we're going to work from there and see just how feasible it is to do like slush effects. It's not going to be heavy snowfall. I know at the moment it looks like there's been a complete whiteout, but that's just how the plaster ends up looking. Once this is done, you kind of start out with a winter themed layout, I guess. The ground cover, you start the same way as you would for any other season. It's just how you then choose your colours to go over the top, and we're going to be doing a lot more like dead grass, no vibrant greens, and the final layer will be a dusting over of snow scatter, which we'll use some strong hairspray just to fix that in place. At the moment Les is just doing the road surface underneath the bridge. It's just a single layer of plaster bandage is enough to do this. And it seals in the jab-like layer that we did think that we might need to gouge out in places, but actually as it happens we've been able to work the layers upwards rather than downwards, which I think works alright, but it still means that we can push things into the base and there's something there to grip them. And this is where the cellophane over the pond comes into its own. So it means we can paint right up to the edge without worrying about ruining the water. Or at least that's the theory. Anything that's sort of like gone messy on the back scene you'll be able to fix when you paint the back scene.
I will.
I'm not really that bothered at the moment about fine detail. This is just simply, it's almost like you're sealing the plaster and providing the first thing to...
the ground, as it were, that's underneath all the scenery.
Yeah, this is effectively what you're looking at here is the earth. And that's what a lot of people, I think, forget, is that you've got to think of what ground is made of and build up the layers accordingly. This is where my scenery style starts to take form. I've got the brown paint on and it now just looks like a chocolate mess. And I've got my fine kiln-dried sand and I'm just going to start sprinkling that into the paint. And this is where you build up the textures. And this is really important for scenery, is the texture, in my opinion.
Definitely.
Because the eye does see the texture.
Yeah.
And, you know, rather than being flat paint, what we've actually started to get here is ground.
Yeah. That's a earthy kind of feel to it.
Yeah. Once you get the scatter on, then it really starts to come together. So just trying to get a load of this in, and then the road as well. We're going to get that first layer of sand in. And it doesn't even matter if you get these little heaps like I've got here. If anything, the glue that I'm going to spray on will sort all that out. For the road, I'm going to build up the sand. I'm going to do a little bit in there as well. And what I'm going to do is just smooth it in. And this also works to bed the bridge in. Because what you don't want is like lines at the bottom where you can see where the bridge
has joined the scenery.
Yeah. And then what I need is, if you pass me my spray thing, this is the next step. And this is just a mix of PVA glue with water. And then this is the bit, I think, on GMRC where people were like, wow, you just sort of hose it down.
Yeah, you do.
You don't want to get too close because otherwise you start to wash the sand away. You just keep it moving. I'm putting quite a lot into the road surface because I put a lot of sand down, and that does need to kind of mix up, and that'll soak into the sand.
Some more at the back, Jen.
Now what I need is a little bit more sand, and anywhere where you see puddles, I'll get it more onto there. Replace any bits where it's kind of washed away. I mean, this sand is like, I think I pay £4.20 for a 10 kilo bag, so you're really not worrying about how much you end up using.
This is kiln dried.
Kiln dried paving sand, it's the stuff when you do block paving, you buy this to brush in between the blocks and it just keys everything
Like
in.
silver sand or whatever.
Something like that. Just kind of revitalising anywhere where it looks a little bit dry. I'm spraying a little bit more of the glue on, and that is now the point where what I need to do is go and get some scatter. I'm going to have a little look at the sort of stuff that Hornby have sent over, what we've got to use. So we've got ash and cinders, fine grade. We've put the snow to one side. We've got flockage, different shades of brown.
Might it be worth putting the buildings into position?
Not
yet. No.
yet. I'm getting the first layer of scatter on, and this I've chosen a brown flockage. This is from the Hornby range. Again, trying to get into those sort of cliff faces.
And nooks and crannies again.
Yeah. A bit of load in the back there. Just building up that ground cover. And what we're going to remember is this is a winter scene, so usually I'd start working the greens in, but I've chosen, because it's a winter scene, to use more of these sort of dark, murky colours.
And we've got some of the sort of grey lichen as well to use.
Yeah, yeah.
Gives it like a hedgerow that's got a sort of a frosty finish. Because that is what we're going to attempt here, to get a light spattering of snow, but not going to be completely white, just certain areas where the snow may have collected.
So this technique's a bit different from what you'd normally use, because you do like a wet mix with paint.
I do.
And you kind of live add scattering as you paint.
I also, with mine, whereas we've let the plaster dry on this, I work while the plaster's still quite wet. So I'm painting matte emulsion paints, basically because it's a cheap paint to get, into the wet plaster, and adding flock and scatter and everything at the same time, and letting it go slightly dry. I also then use a stiff brush, a hog hair brush or something like that, to wipe back, to bring out some of the rock colour, the grey and the white that's already there. But it's very, very similar, but it's just a slightly different technique, but it gives the same kind of effect at the end of the day.
Yeah, I guess it's like what I always say to people. There's no right way, there's no wrong way. There's many different ways to produce the effects that you want. And even though it's winter,
there'll be some
greens.
Bit of dead grass coming through.
So you've got to remember, this will get very muted down by the white snow scatter. But it's not a barren wasteland of mud underneath the snow. There are colours and vegetation. So I think as well, what we will do with the building is I tend to run some PVA type glue around the base and sticks like foliage around the base to kind of hide the gap. And even though they might be placed loose, they still actually look all right. Don't forget, you can keep adding the glue as and when required. What we're going to have next, I'm thinking actually, where is it? This stuff I really like. This is woodland ground cover. So we're going to decide like places where you just want this wonderful kind of dead stuff kind of texture. So I'm going to a little bit on these slopes here, and this we'll give it a blast with the watered down glue, and this will end up sort of around underneath
some of the trees that are
definitely. And I'm going to put some over there as well, a little bit on there. I'm going to leave that free because we've got a building going there.
Maybe a bit more around the edge of the pond.
Yeah, I'll move in that direction.
It's good stuff.
I like it. I think it actually is dried bark chippings, but I couldn't be absolutely certain.
Might well be. I wonder if you can actually get the ordinary bark chippings and use a grater.
Possibly, but see with this, it's kind of it's been, I don't know whether it's been treated or something like that, but you're not going to get any weird growth,
No.
which is what you don't want. Right, now this is dead grass, and what I'm using is it's like a static grass, and this actually works really well.
Between your fingers to give it that.
Yeah.
Because it still sticks up sufficiently.
Yeah. And if anything, you're kind of giving it a slight static charge. And this is how all of my scenery upstairs on Weir Yard was done. These kind of techniques. And I don't know about yourself, but I find that the more model railway stuff I build, the better I get. So much so that, I look at this and think, actually, my techniques come on, it looks better than a lot of
that's what I found with Not Lobia from the start to the finish over the 13 years. I mean, I started to alter so many things and to redo things because
that's the danger, isn't it? You end up coming back and going, I can redo.
And now I've got to do it all again. So
yeah, it's a blank canvas. I mean, I found with Weir Yard that it was so far moved on from the techniques I'd used out in the shed. I was really pleased with it. But now, we did the GMRC things, and I found that my techniques and my confidence marched on so much that I came back and looked at Weir Yard, and there was the bits that I'd been so proud of.
You thought, they're not very good now, they? Yes.
Yeah, the bits that I'd done first, especially, I look at them and think, I need to revisit that. So what we've got here is basically, this is your basis of a winter landscape, and this kind of dead grass is pretty good. Around the building, we're going to put like gravel paths in, I guess. What we're going to do is we've got this very fine black gravel, and we're going to use that to start to build up the road surface. So, just going to sprinkle that in. There's a lot of that glue already gone down, so just kind of give ourselves a bit of a surface. The only trouble is under the bridge is a bit tricky, so top tip for you.
I don't know why you blow it.
Yeah, Les has got it in one. So I get some on my hand. I need to get in and I've got it all over the bridge as well.
Don't worry, because some of that will brush off anyway.
Yeah, don't worry. But then also, where are we wanting this path? I think.
Well, there's the path going up, just up and around down to the pond.
Okay. So we're gonna
something like that.
A little bit of a path to the pond. Do we want one through the trees, or not?
Not specifically, no.
Okay, let's just stick with. Just widen that road area. Some of this is going to disappear under scatter, and you wanted somewhere else where the building's going, because there's like.
Do you want to plonk the building in situ? Then you can scatter around it.
Well, what we'll do is we'll go like there.
Yeah.
So what we're doing now is when we were working yesterday, we put a lot of the base layers on. So we got the sand to give us that kind of earthy texture. And we did some woodland floor material, which is like a coarse, almost like fine shredded bark, and some of the brown scatters and the very, very dark burnt grass green. What we've done over the top of this now, using a hairspray as the glue, is I've put a little bit of this autumn grass. Now you can get winter grass, and I was comparing it today in a shop, and the winter grass is just a little bit slightly yellower, a little bit lighter. So I decided, as I already had the autumn grass, I'd just use that. And this provides us with our kind of washed out, miserable looking winter ground that when we start to sprinkle snow over the top, a lot of this will get very muted down.
And what I've done here is, this is the little Hornby shop. We've put the icicles on, made from the hot glue gun, which is stuck on again with hot glue gun. Initially they were done as strips and serrated with a blade to to give that kind of effect. I've applied the icicles to the edges of the building in various places, under the window ledge, under the eaves of the roof and around the shop window and everything. I've used some watercolour paint and a cotton bud to smear the windows to give that kind of misty effect that you get in the winter time. And I've then used pure white watercolour on the roof to give the idea that there's quite a bit of snow that's settled on there. I think overall that looks quite a chilly place to be at the moment.
Now, Les, I was just thinking, I wondered whether, with the paint on the roof being a little bit wet at the moment, do you think putting a very slight scatter of the snow scatter onto that, because it'll stick into the paint and it'll start to make it look a little bit more like fluffy snow?
Yeah, could try that.
Shall we give that a go?
Yeah, because we've not done that idea before. It's quite a bit of experimentation going on.
Yeah, just hoping that it doesn't go all wrong.
I don't think it'll go all wrong. And then I'll do a similar technique to the little hut that we've got.
Is that working?
Yeah.
I've got a scrap piece of Pico track just out of my scrap box, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to roughly cut it so that it fits in. We have a piece of track that's exactly the right length. So we had a little discussion earlier on about whether we were going to put the track on the bottom and have the top as a road, but in the end we've decided, because that curve is just too tight, we'll go back to our original idea, which was the track on the top. So I've trimmed that now to fit. I used a little tiny bit of scrap track just to extend it, and I've glued it in, and then I've ballasted it, and at the moment the glue in the ballast is wet, and because the surface was quite uneven, we weren't too bothered about making an absolutely flat and hard surface for the track, because it's just a opposable diorama. So there's a lot of ballast underneath the track just making up the height, and the glue that's in there is going to take a little while to dry, but you can really start to see just what this little diorama scene is going to be like.
What I'm doing here is just a very impressionistic kind of background, because we're going to have a number of trees going up here, and when you look at a pine forest or anything like that, it's just a solid mass of green and dark colours. So rather than just having this all sky, we'll have some sky on the edges here, but in the background here I'm just literally scribbling more than anything, just to try and get an idea of tree sort of shapes, because there'll be other trees in front of these that kind of obliterate it, but it'll get rid of this basic white background. So it's just chalk pastels and just literally doing a lot of vertical kind of strokes to begin with, that are going to go up, some sort of sideways, just dabs, because it's an impression of the background. It's not detail, just like I was saying to Jenny that we did in the War of the Worlds, where I created the fire sort of effects. It's literally just flat edges of chalk, and it gives an overall impression, because you're not concentrating on the background, you concentrate on everything else here, but it'll just help to homogenise
and
everything
also,
together.
I think the thing is, a lot of people get scared at the idea of doing a back scene because they think they have to be incredibly detailed, and actually it's much better if you have impressions, detail, blurred detail, because it gives a much greater sense of depth.
Yes, it's like in a camera, you've got the field of vision, field of focus, the f-stops and all that malarkey, and things that are in focus, what you concentrate. A colleague of mine, an artist, very, very talented artist, he paints with watercolour and airbrush to do with wildlife, but he'll paint the background in quite good detail to begin with, and then he'll mist it out with an airbrush so it goes all blurred, and then he'll build up the detail again in the front. We're not trying to create a painting in that sense. We're trying to make it look like it's set within a little world somewhere. So as long as the eyes are focusing on that, and the background will just help to bring things into focus, as it were.
And the other thing as well is that by having this on the back scene, we're not having an abrupt end to the world, which, once we put the trees in there, if we didn't have that, it would just be this solid wall of white immediately behind the trees, which you would see through the trees, and gives you this very firm, almost like a curtain drawn on the edge of the world. which it kind of just doesn't draw you into the scene. It abruptly jars you back out.
So I just put some pastel on here because I'm just trying to give it a grey, sort of wintry sort of feel. It's not a nice bright sunny day or anything.
So it's like a leaden sky, almost like there's more.
And I'll add some more
snow to come.
Some more colour, more grey, and some more white to it a bit later on. Try and build it up. I've added some yellow into the sky. It won't look as yellow as that when it's finished, but
It'll get blurred
it's
in, I guess.
It's a watery, wintry sky, so there'll be more colours put into that, and it'll get toned down quite a bit more. I'm just stippling bits of black and bits of dark green to give the idea that, you know, these are trees, bits of the foliage, because there'll be trees in the front here. It's only to blank out the background. We've got more or less a sky in that would be all right. Sometimes you can get effects purely by accident. I think that's quite how a lot of abstract artists actually do some fantastic work. Not decrying them in any way, but this section here, almost looks like there's snow in the air. And all I've done is I've just been smearing chalk on and rubbing it in with my finger. And this is actually sort of from the spatter that's happened when Jenny has sprayed it with the scenic glue and everything. But it's given quite a good effect.
Yeah. And that's the thing about modelling, is that sometimes these very chance accidents that you never planned make such great results. Yeah. And I think when you do modelling, you have to be a little bit flexible, and if you are prepared to be flexible, you can kind of go where the model takes you a little bit and actually make use of little accidents like that. It's not bad for what amounts to, we've probably done maybe 2.5 hours worth of work so far on it. So it just goes to show that you can put together modelling stuff very, very quickly. So what we've done here is I started planting the trees. Now that Les has done the back seam, I'm going to start working from the back forwards. And what we're going to try and do is we've got these cheap already dusted trees, and they're going to be at the back, and then we want to use the ones that Hornby have sent as the feature trees, have them slightly further forward, and then they've sent a couple of these really nice scale scenic trees, and these are going to be in the prime positions. I've used them upstairs on Weir Yard an awful lot, and they've sent over these two, a big one and a medium one, and these are, I think they're Nordic firs, and we're going to use these as feature trees more towards the foreground. So I'm probably going to have a big one there, and the medium one I'm maybe going to have down here somewhere, and they're going to be the kind of in the foreground trees. And then the other ones they sent over, I've already planted one here, but I've got 3 more of varying sizes. And what I want with these is to bring these in front of the ones that we've got to just kind of pad out the tree line. We've got some lights to go inside some of the buildings. And what I'm doing is I'm lengthening the wires to them. Oops. I've already drilled a hole, and you can see there I've inserted a plastic tube down the hole. And the idea behind that is that because that's going through the actual textured scenery, if I just try to push wires down there, they just get caught on the plaster cloth, the insulation layer. And you just really have a difficult job to try and get them through. By pushing a spare scrap piece of plastic tube through there, the wires will just drop straight through to the underside with no hassle whatsoever. So it's just a little trick. I'm going to put a hole through for wiring. So what we're up to now is we've got some of the lights in. You can see here the actual bulbs. We've got the wires fed through. And I've now stuck this building in place. And what I'm going to do now is to hide the join. I'm going to use the glue and actually kind of lay a bead all the way around the building. And then what I'm going to use is just some of the scatter, and I'm going to just push that into the glue. So when the glue sets, it'll just look a little bit grassy.
It also stops any light bleed coming through between the base of the building and the ground. What we've got here is a little bonfire that we've painted up. It's got a very small LED in that will be wired in like Jenny's done with the lights there, and then we'll have some people sort of huddled around that. I'm hoping maybe that I will be able to, with the hot glue gun, try and actually make sort of some flames that are coming up from it. We'll see when we get it in situ and paint those. A bit like the tea lights that you get to put in your Christmas decorations. They have an artificial flame, so that might work quite effective. It's probably a little bit big at the moment, but that's the basic idea.
So I've got the light in place, and I've put this in with some glue as well. So it's really taking shape now. And just again, running some of this in, just poke it into the glue with your finger. That glue just dries clear. It's not a big deal. What I'm going to do is a small amount of this again. So what we're going to do here is, Les has suggested that where we're going to put the small Christmas trees for sale in front of this this place here, we're going to put some more of this sort of forest scatter on the ground, so it's going to look like, where trees have been chopped and activity's been going on. And I guess as well, what we'll also try and do is be a little less severe with the snow when we put that on, because it'll be somewhere that's been kind of trodden in.
Yeah.
And then, just to secure this, I'm going to use the actual glue mix rather than just hairspray. And then to put the little tiny Christmas trees in, I am going to create a hole. It's actually a bit tricky because there's wood underneath there, so it goes through there. A little dab, pull that out, locate the hole, push it in.
You could even have some just lying flat and squashed to actually.
Okay, I'll pass that to you.
Okay.
Now take the screwdriver out. We've got a ready-made hole. Bish bash bosh. There it goes.
I've just taken one of the Christmas trees and I'm rolling it up to try and make it look like a tree that's been selected by one of the little people there, and they're going to take it away. And a lot of trees nowadays, when you buy them, they're wrapped in some kind of netting or some sort of cellophane. So it's just to lie a few down as if they're trees that have been already selected.
I'm putting the holes in for a lot of the electronics now, so I'm just making sure we don't get any of this polystyrene stuff sticking where it shouldn't. This is coming up from the slab of jab light that forms the actual base. And then what I've got to do is try and feed these wires through such a way that they come out the bottom. I wonder if I push them through like that.
Yeah, that's done it.
I think that has.
You can probably reach it from your end. And if we have it so the light's facing.
Is it alright to glue it? So
yes,
it
glue it into position. With a bit of luck, that would be able to just be plonked.
We're going to get that a bit tighter. It's a shame really, the one I've glued down. In fact, what about use that one?
Use that one, yeah.
Should we do that? Let's have a pass over with
the snow first.
Yeah.
And the hairspray or whatever.
Because these, what we'll do with these is we'll stick them in, hairspray them, and then a little bit of snowy scatter over them.
The top, yeah.
And if we do them more towards the back, and what I'm thinking is up in amongst and around these trees, this is the point where we're going to try and put a covering of snow over this. And this is kind of uncharted territory for me. I've not done snow scenes before. So essentially I've built it as almost like a drab, dreary scene, as if it's winter time. But I want to get this dusting of snow over, and it is the proper stuff. It's snow scatter from Pico, and what I'm going to try and do is put it through a sieve so we don't get like big clumps. And I'm going to try and do it from reasonably high up, almost as if it really is snowing on the scene. And let's just see how we go. So first up, I guess, we need to mist over all the areas that we want snow in. Places like trees, grass. Concentrate on trees that need to have a smattering of snow. Right, and then we're going in.
We're going in.
It's working. It's working. Actually, it is.
Yes. That's brilliant. That is brilliant.
I think the sieve actually really does make the difference.
Yeah.
It's going to be a bit of a mess around the edges, but I'm going to get some more at that back there. And I like the way you can see how it, almost like how snow blows in the wind.
And it still leaves some of the underlying texture and effects.
This actually works really well. I'm getting the track bed as well, because you know where the trains go, they don't tend to disturb the snow so much.
Do we need a bit more hairspray on the trees?
I'm going to go over with the hairspray, trying to fix this in place. Just making sure that it's got some level of robustness to it. We're trying to actually make snow we can build a snowman out of, is the best way of describing this. So we're mixing some glue with the snow scatter, because we've got plenty of snow scatter left over. And we're just seeing if it's possible to... Do you want a bit more glue?
I think maybe a bit more glue. Right, okay.
Yeah, because the trick here is not to make it too big. There's always a temptation to make things slightly oversized. Do you need any more of the scatter, or are you good?
I think I'll be good for time being.
Radio.
It's going to look like, is it Olaf or whatever it's called in there?
Yeah, well, you just need like the two balls, and then we can always use something like a permanent marker to just dab the coal bits on. We haven't really got any twigs we can use.
Snowmen do tend to be bigger than the figures, or reasonable size.
Once it's dry, we can like dot.
Yeah, I was trying that with a pointy bit of your pen. Oh.
Yeah. So you can see it was a really good reason why we put this over the top to protect the surface of the lake, because you're not going to get snow and stuff like that all over it. So a little bit of moisture got underneath, I have to say, so we're just got to be a bit careful here.
I'll put this. I've got two.
Ooh. Might need to give that a polish.
It's really coming together nicely now, and now with the background, that kind of wintry landscape, instead of having a white canvas, it all looks brilliant. It really does. Very, very pleased with that effect.
So I'm going to put the fire in actually as well. Doesn't look anything special until we basically fire her up, and then that'll be like a little fire.
Needs a bit of time to set. Stick that in the ground. Christmas trees, Xmas trees for sale, pick your own. I'll put that over here for now. Well, these would be like sort of hedgerows and kind of trees that could be glued up against that to help to hide.
Yeah, just kind of squeeze it in. Actually works really well. I'm thinking maybe
just another piece
Yeah,
to help
let's just keep it round here.
Yeah.
I think just sometimes less is more.
Yeah, maybe a bit going up onto the sky, so it's helping to disguise the fact that the track isn't going anywhere.
Yeah, I know what you mean. There we are, and that putting the snow scatter on those just really mutes them down just a little bit. There we go, and I think we are golden.
So, Jen, what do you reckon?
I think it's come together all right.
Yes.
I was worried when the snow was about to go on. I thought, I'd never done snow effects before, and I thought it was going to be either hero or zero. And actually, the snow has gone on far better than I could have imagined. I've still got to clean the track up, but that's not an issue. But everywhere else, it actually looks like it's had a dusting of snow.
And it just looks, the whole landscape, the background, it all help it to make it, a nice wintry scene.
Yeah.
But there's a warmth about it. It's not an Arctic kind of scene.
It's like a Christmas
thing.
thing.
Definitely a Christmassy feel about it.
Yeah, on a tin of Christmas chocolates.
Yes.
It's that kind of winter scene that you see there. It's all happy and like, yay!
Yeah. And we know that the gizmo will work. All we've got to do when it's fully dried is to put the ice skaters on. So another sort of few days, and that'll be gone off. The lights are all fixed in. And
I just think there's some really nice touches on here.
Little Christmas tree sign and the Christmas tree on the old Anglia there.
Yeah.
A little bonfire. I think we've got a couple more little people we could put around the bonfire when it's.
There's another pack from Hornby that they sent us, so we can do some stuff with that.
And all the icicles on the buildings.
I think I was a bit apprehensive when you started work on those buildings. I thought, what's he doing? But actually, it's really come together well. But I mean, I love this effect.
The way that
with the snow and because you've seen.
But that's because you put all the gravel and everything on to give you that texture of the earth. So it didn't just dry as a flat surface.
Yeah.
It's gone into the nooks and crannies. It's given the shadows.
And it's something actually which anybody's wanted to do a winter scene. You have to actually do a regular scene before the snow comes.
Yes.
You can't just use the snow as the final ground cover because it's not going to work. You're not going to get these subtle colours just like you would in real life. When I turn this handle, you see the ice skaters going around, and I'm really pleased with that. It was actually one of the first things that I thought of when they asked me to do a winter stroke Christmas scene. This was actually what I was thinking of. I thought a nice little animation. But I didn't tell them about it because I thought, in case it doesn't work, I don't want to look a bit foolish. But it'll also be a nice reveal. So this here is going to be a nice surprise for the good folks at Hornby. The electrics are actually fairly basic, it has to be said. I didn't want to go overboard. So we've got the two buildings, so we decided between us that we could do with lighting them up. It's always a simple addition to any layout is to light the buildings, which is really simple and effective. Then Les brought round a street light. We did think about having more than one, but again, we didn't want to really crowd it with too many lights. You can make things look a bit too much like the Las Vegas Strip if you're not careful. And then Les has the Ford Anglia that's got lights fitted and suggested that we make use of that. And little details like this are a quite simple way to bring a layout to life. And finally, we had this little bonfire effect it's like flickering LEDs, and it works off the 12 volts. And actually we've turned the voltage down a little bit just to make sure that we don't get any bleed through off the buildings. And what we're actually using to power this is the standard Hornby AC controller that just comes with any DC set. So Les has got it there, and you can control the voltage on the model just by turning the dial, and just get it just right. And it's a really good use for some of these controllers that come in set. So if you buy the set, this isn't wasted. This is gold for powering effects on your model. And then we've decided to pose the Hogwarts castle that featured in one of the big review videos that I did for Hornby. And it just seemed appropriate that it was such a good model that it really complemented what we've got going on here.
Well, I think Jen's covered most of what we've done there. We've got some very nice Christmassy effects. we've got the postman, we've got the snow on the telephone box and the letterbox, the icicles on the building, even the little sign we managed to do, Xmas trees for sale, pick your own, and we've used little N-gauge sort of trees there to give you the idea of the trees that you go along and pick up, and the tractor's got a trailer with some trees loaded on that they're bringing in. And the people in the Anglia have already bought theirs and put it on the roof and strapped it on. So there's lots of little details that we've added to it. Yes, you could go on and on and on and on, adding more and more to it, but we had to work within a reasonable time constraint, and I think generally speaking we've created a very rich tapestry for this little winter wonderland scene that Hornby asked us to do.
So final touches now. I've got the lake surface adjusted. I wedged a little distance piece in, and that now means that it moves freely off the winding handle. That in turn has let me glue the skaters onto the pond, so we've got a really nice effect where they appear to just be skating in circles. And it's just a nice little animation that shows that they don't need to be all that complicated to add something to the model. And finally, we thought no winter Christmas scene would be complete without Santa, with his reindeer giving out a few presents to the children. So we've also got that now represented on the model. And the final piece, the final piece, is we thought Hogwarts Castle would be the perfect locomotive to display on the short length of track. So it all comes together now, and the final scene is visible in its entirety. It's really nice to actually see all those ideas that we talked about at the beginning and how they evolved throughout the build, to see them really just come together as this unified whole, and it is quite gratifying actually. I'm really pleased with the end result that we've got here.
I think Jenny and I have worked really hard on this, and it's come together probably far better than both of us sort of envisaged. When we were creating it, we didn't want it just to be a basic box with a white sort of square edges. One of the reasons that we made it curved round the back there was to try and get rid of the hard edge. We've got one hard edge in that corner, but it's slightly obliterated anyway. And yes, it's just very, very effective. All our little ideas, the skaters, the lights that we put in the buildings, it's really brought everything to life. And with all the little figures, the Hornby tractor and the little car, we have put some lights into the car. That was an extra thing that we did. But generally speaking, from the brief that we've given, I think we've nailed it well and truly.
Today's video has been brought to you in part thanks to the generous donation of my fans on Patreon. And an extra special huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Michael Churchwood, Bob Threeton, Alec Ralph, Anthony Hunt, William Wade, Wayne Johns, Offshore Allen, and oorail.co.uk. If you'd like to help support the show, head on over to patreon.com/Jennifer Kirk. Thank you. Today's video has been brought to you by my books, Bringing Home the Stars, Twinkle Little Star, and also you can get the complete comic collections of All Over the House, Books 1, Books 2, and also the wacky zany Life of Knobty Mouse. Thanks, and catch you later.